don't come to this hall and tell this hall that you're a European, and go to another and talk to an Islamic audience as Islamic brothers. Because that is what you have spent your career doing.
What's wrong?
Speaking through. Let me finish this. And Tariq comes here one day and says, we fellow Europeans, we all speak to each other as fellow Europeans. And another, he speaks to a Muslim audience and says, we as Muslims. Which is it, Tariq? Which is it?
I'm a Muslim.
In today's video, we shall be looking into a debate as to whether Europe is failing the Muslims.
All right, so let's hear our panelists make their opening statements. So, first, for the motion, Europe is failing its Muslims, Tariq Ramadan. Now, he is Professor of Contemporary Islamic Studies at Oxford University. He's been taught by some of the best Muslim scholars in the world, but he's also very active at the grassroots level. He is President of the European Muslim Network. Tariq Ramadan, your time starts now.
Thank you. Let me start by saying that we are living in a difficult situation. If you listen to what is said in the European countries, the perception is very bad. 75%, for example, French people are associating Islam with violence. The perception is that Islam is a problem and that Muslims are creating problems.
There is a very good reason why 75% of French people think this. You only have to look at all the demonstrations happening in the Western world where these Muslims are hurling racial abuse, flaunting swastika banners, and basically not wanting to fit into the society of that particular country.
They are not really perceived at home in Europe. Every single European society has its own debates, its own controversies around the Muslim presence. The first one is the way Europe is defining itself. The current discourse and the general discourse is that Muslims are not European citizens. We have millions of Muslims that are already Europeans. And this is the situation when we speak about Turkey, for example. It's as if we are speaking about people who are coming from outside, not acknowledging the fact that we already have Europeans that are Muslims in our country. Not only this, on the geographical dimension, it's as if when we speak about Europe, we speak about Western Europe. Eastern Europe is not there. The Muslims who are being Europeans for generations and centuries are not perceived as Europeans. The Bosnian people are not.
As mentioned a moment ago, it's the Muslims that don't want to be perceived as Europeans. Their actions are proving this as factual. Right, back to the video.
Europeans, it's as if because they are Muslims, they are less Europeans. Our politicians very often they speak about their fellow citizens as if they don't know who are these new citizens who are Muslim and they are living with them. It's as if these new citizens are problematic because of their religion but not citizens as to their status. And this is where we have this confusion. We speak about cultural and we Islamize the socio-economic problems. Muslims in our societies are facing unemployment, discrimination and racism, and it's not because they are Muslims, it's because they are facing class discrimination, segregation, and wrong social policies. At the cultural level, it's as if the new visibility of the Muslims is just showing that they don't want to integrate. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. The opposite, they are visible. Millions are visible. It means that they are at home. So when you have mosques, when you have organizations, it's not because you don't want to integrate. It's exactly the opposite. You feel at home, you build your mosque, and even this, it's also a very important point.
Just a quick thought. If we as Christians wanted to build a church in their country and try to integrate like the Muslims in the West, would it be allowed? I don't think so.
In the reality, so it's the opposite. When it comes to food, curry and couscous, that's fine. When it comes to money, Islamic banking, that's fine. But when it comes to dresses, when it comes to color, when it comes to something which is different, it's not fine. So we are selective in our integration. Money and food, welcome. Colors and dresses, no. So, last point, when it comes to the media, it's as if here we are only dealing with problems and we are dealing with these controversies every day. We are talking about violence, the minarets, the headscarves. all the problems, not talking about what is done at the grassroots level, the positive actions of the Muslims, the presence. Millions are silent and are constructive and contributing to the reality of our country. And let me say something which is important. The Muslims are understanding the West and Europe much better than before. They are understanding and rediscovering their religion much better than before. And I would say, yes, I'm supporting this motion because today we are failing, but it's a question of time, because what I see at the grassroots level is much more positive than what is happening today in our political discourse, media coverage. Things are very important behind. This is what I call the silent revolution, but we need time and it will be coming. Thank you.
It begs the question, what kind of revolution?
Well, a very passionate and fluent opening there to our debate. Against the motion is Douglas Murray. He's the director of the Centre for Social Cohesion here in Britain, which tries to promote integration between Britain's ethnic minorities and the wider population, and it specialises in radicalisation. So, Douglas Murray, your time starts now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Tariq says that Europeans associate Islam with violence. There is some truth in that.
Now, Douglas Murray puts some hard, painful facts into play.
There is also a very obvious reason for that, which is that Islam is associated with violence. It was not Buddhists who flew planes into the Twin Towers. It was not Hindus or Jews that blew up the London Underground and buses a few years ago. And that simple fact has to be acknowledged if you're even going to start a dialogue. Now, what is happening, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a pantomime. I'd argue that Europe has done not too badly, considering the circumstances. In the middle of the last century, there was an almost negligible Muslim presence in Europe. At the turn of the 21st, in Western Europe alone, there were 15 to 17 million Muslims. That's a very fast migration, ladies and gentlemen, one of the fastest in human history. And no society would find it easy to deal with that kind of migration. As it happens, European societies, Western European societies have, I think, dealt with this much better than some would. Certainly, Muslims coming to live in Britain and in Western Europe enjoy more rights and better rights, among them freedom of worship, than they do in any Islamic country in the earth here today. We do have a problem. We have a problem when the failures of Islam throughout the world, the failures of all Islamic societies, come here into Britain. Their intolerance of freedom of conscience, their intolerance of apostates, their intolerance of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, their intolerance of minorities, other religious minorities, sexual minorities, their intolerance of gays, their dislike and distrust of half of the population, women, and many, many other things. And the call, what's more, for a parallel legal system within Britain and European societies. This is monstrous. No other group behaves like this, asks for parallel laws. This is a fundamental problem, and it's one we're going to have to deal with. It's a problem between a society, Western Europe, that believes that laws are based on reason, and Islam that believes that they are based on revelation. Between these two ideas, I'm not sure there is very much compromise for Europe. It is not Europe that has let down its Muslims, but the Muslims of Europe that have let down Europe. This is not solely something which we have to say we can never reconcile. Of course we can reconcile this, but we need to be honest about it. We need to be frank about it, and we cannot avoid things just because they are unpleasant. And if there were one thing I would wish Muslims in Europe could learn today, as fast as possible, it would be this: that you have no right in this society not to be offended. You have no right to say that because you don't like something, you can commit violence, or you would like something to be stopped or censored. You have no right to have more hate laws, or hate crime laws, or hate speech laws, just to defend Islam. You have to realize, the Muslims of Europe have to realize, that a society in which even your deepest feelings can be trodden upon is the only society worth living in. And the sooner we can learn that, the sooner that Islam can learn that within Europe, the better. It is not Europe that has failed its Muslims. It is Islam that has failed Europe. I'd argue Islam has failed its Muslims. Thank you.
The truth hurts.
certainly stirred things up a bit there, didn't you, Douglas Murray? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, well, let me invite some comments from the floor, and let's go to the lady there. Yeah.
I'm a British female. I love this country, and I give this country. Now you're calling me a problem. I don't think I am. I think you are. Second point is, as a Muslim female, okay, my parents might not let me go somewhere late at night because people are racist to me. They tell me to go back home and they hurt me. I got hit by 2 white guys and they laughed at me because I'm a scarfy, okay? Last point is to Mr. Fleming, about the point where you said about the religion, changing religion. Every person has the right to. No one says anything about that. But if you had a daughter or a son that wanted to become a Muslim, would you be happy about that? I don't think so.
Could you answer the question, Petra?
When my daughter was born in '98, I called her Soraya, which is the Arabic name for Pleiades, because I felt that she needed to have a present for the rest of her life. After 9/11, people asked me whether I had regretted giving her an Arabic name. And I felt sorry for the person who asked that question.
That there's prejudice against...
No, the point I'm making is, and I think it's the point the lady is making as well, that the fact that people are called Mohammed is probably, in the perception of many, putting them in a disadvantage. And of course, I totally disagree.
Now Douglas clarifies what prejudice really means and why it shouldn't be tolerated.
Douglas, I want to ask you, you heard some of the people from the floor there, the woman complaining about attacks on her because she's described as a scarfie, because she wears a head veil. I mean, that is something that you would regret. I mean, that doesn't promote social cohesion, does it?
Nobody thinks that any physical attacks or any such thing could be a good thing to happen. Of course not. Of course there are. Let's make sure we're right.
Talking about
prejudice exists in society. Let's just be absolutely clear as an audience. Prejudice undoubtedly exists in this society. It exists across racial groups, including from minorities to other minorities, after all, which is one of the things we see increasingly in Britain these days. And it is also the case that people, in particularly famously lower socioeconomic groups, are likely to feel hatred for other groups. That is one of the things that has to be tackled, and everyone, I think, in this hall, I'm sure, we're in agreement that that should be tackled. But do not mix up somebody, a thug, a racist, and so on, attacking somebody in a street with the right of Fleming and me to say what we see in the Quran, what we think of Muhammad, and maybe even asserting our right to say so.
Okay, all right. Now, closing statements.
Thank you. Well, first of all, just to pick up on a couple of people, particularly women, who've said about the terrific things that Islam gives women in terms of rights. The first thing is, yes, in 7th century Arabia, some of this was progressive. In 21st century Britain, it is not. And you have to make that fundamental admission that the Quran is not a document for women's rights in Europe in 2010. It is not. Secondly, why is it that only Islamic societies and mosques in this country are places which teach and preach hatred of other minorities? Every single week in this country, there are people on campuses who teach the murder of minorities. Last week, it was somebody who calls for the murder of apostates. The week before, at another university, it was somebody who believes the Jews are fair game. This is not tolerable. It is not tolerable for Muslims. It is not tolerable from anyone else. You, I hope, would agree with me that any minority that engaged in such hatred and bigotry should be criticized. Don't pretend that the cloak of Islam and Islamic belief and religious fervor means that people like us cannot say that people who call for the murder of minorities are not mainstream, are not acceptable, and have to be critiqued.
Douglas, as always, wraps things up with factual truth, to which some people can't handle.
So, Tariq Ramadan, Professor of Contemporary Islamic Studies at Oxford University, final word goes to you, your closing statement, incorporating some of the points raised by our audience.
Thank you for that, and welcome to social cohesion. That's really nice.
So I would say here that when we look at what is happening now, I am saying, yes, now Europe is failing its Muslims as something which is the global, the overall picture. Now when we come with time, what is happening in Europe now is quite different. And this is what I call the silent revolution. When we look at what is going on at the grassroots level with citizens that are European Muslims and Muslim Europeans, and they are here and they are going to stay, and they are going now to go to something which is not to talk about integration. They are all fed up with integrate. Now they contribute, now they give, now they build, and this is it. So, to respond to what you said, I would agree with you that the feeling of the Muslims that they are at home, but for the time being we still have to work. This is why I'm saying yes, we are failing our Muslims, and we have to work together to change this perception and to change the reality. And the first I'm addressing here, and by the way, you know, I can call you brother in humanity. I did it yesterday, I am going to do it today, I'm going now to tell you this. It's not a problem for me to say to my brothers and sisters in humanity, in religion, and as citizens that we are brothers and sisters. If you have a problem with brotherhood, it's not my problem. So the point here is, please, we have been talking about what doesn't work. Let us speak about what works at the grassroots level.
All right,
Now, this video was taken way back in 2010, some 14 years ago. Have things changed? Have things gotten worse? Facts though now are the Islam immigrants, as a majority, have been causing so much hatred in the West, with videos out there saying, and I quote, "We will take over. This is our country now." Does this not show Muhammad's followers and the jihads, to name but two, do not want to fit into Western society, but to take over and instill their demonic, hateful, barbaric ways? Thank you for watching, and please leave your comments below.